Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to today's webinar, The Hidden Job Market Part 2, Informational Interview to Job Offer. If you're experiencing technical difficulties joining the WebEx session, viewing the presentation, or with audio quality, please dial 1-866-229-3239 for the WebEx Live Event Technical Support. If outside of the U.S., please use 1-408-435-7088. During the presentation, all of our attendees will be in a listen-only mode. So if looking at the list of attendees, because of privacy requirements, you will only see yourself listed. Let's go and get started, and I'll turn the call over to Christine Tatro. Please go ahead.
This is Christine Tatro, Associate Director, Alumni Career and Professional Development, and I'd like to welcome you to our Fall 2012 Career Management Webinar Series. We're very pleased that you're joining us today for Hidden Job Market Part 2, Informational Interview to Job Offer, with presenter Stambouli of Stambouli Career Consulting. This workshop will help you successfully navigate the informational exploratory meeting process, so that more of these meetings lead to job interviews and offers. Key ways today include understanding the value of meeting with potential hiring managers, even if there's no current job opening. How to strong and lasting first impression so that hiring managers will want you to come back to meet their boss and colleagues. To get hiring managers excited, feel a sense of urgency about bringing someone like you on board. Now, this is the second part of a presentation that Sarah gave originally in April of this year, Accessing the Hidden Job Market 1, Step-by-Step Roadmap for Landing Meetings with Hiring Managers at Your Target Organizations. So if you haven't seen that webinar, I strongly suggest you visit our career video library and take a look at those slides and that presentation, along with the one you're participating in today. Our webinar is being recorded, and the slide deck was emailed to you at the address you used to register for the program. Our program will be 6 minutes, and we will take questions. If you'd like to submit a written question, please to the floating toolbar in the lower right-hand corner of your screen. And I'm taking questions throughout the presentation and asking as Sarah goes through her presentation today. We'll not be able to answer every question in the course of the presentation today, but we will attempt to address those questions being asked by the majority of you. Just a note, the questions your questions will not be viewable by other attendees. And I would very much like to turn the presentation over to Sarah Stambouli.
Hello. Welcome, everybody. I'm really happy to be delivering part 2 of the Hidden Job Market because I find it to be the most valuable, underutilized job search method for clients who are mainly actually alumni of top business schools like yourselves. So let's get started. So to begin and to get you all in the interactive mode, let's start with a poll. The first question is, these are easy questions because I know you're tired after watching the election last night. The first question is, what is your current employment situation? Unemployed and fully focused on job search, or you should be working as well as job hunting, working and planning to job hunt. So go now and answer the poll by clicking the button, it looks like there. So the reason this matters is that are unemployed and fully focused on job search, you will this to be, and you have a lot of time at your disposal, particularly you're going to find this extremely helpful. Way you a lot, you get a lot more meetings from following the tips in the first webinar, and then this will help turn a lot more of those into more of a job interviewing process, which is the goal. So, Did the first one go through? Should I go to the second question?
Yeah, why don't we go ahead with the second question?
I can't really tell what's happening. So number 2, and like I said, these are easy. How many informational interviews or exploratory meetings have you had in the last 4 months with potential hiring managers? So this would be HR or recruiters, unless you're looking to do that kind of work yourself. It would be, oh, you've gone ahead and done it. Great. It would be someone who would be your boss if he or she got an opening and hired you. Okay, so let's take a look at this. So 37% are unemployed and fully focused on job search. 20% are working as well as job hunting, and 34% are working and planning to job hunt. And we had lots of distractions in the last week or so, but hopefully now we'll be able to all concentrate a little more and get back to moving ahead with our career goals. The second question is, how many informational interviews or exploratory meetings have you had in the last 4 months? 3% have had 0 to 2. 3% have had 3 to 9. That's great. And 2% have had 10 or more. Okay, so let's get those other numbers up, and let's get going. Okay, sorry. There we go. Okay. So to make this a little more easy to relate to, I thought we could define a situation that one of you might be in to have some real examples, almost like a case study. So we're going to say that for today, your part, if you choose to play it, is that you are an e-commerce executive, and you're currently a partner at a large digital consulting and advertising agency leading the e-commerce practice. So you're on the agency side. Your job before this was a similar role at an integrated agency, so it was print and TV as well as digital. And your career post MBA was as a general management consulting, of course, a top 3 consulting firm. And your job goal is to be a senior executive leading U.S. e-commerce for a major global clothing retailer whose U.S. headquarters are in New York City. That's very specific, but that's the way a target should be. The more specific your target, the more the easier it will be to follow this process, and the more your research for one job will pay off for another job, which is very important too, because I'm going to be dedicating a lot of research and a lot of work, but if it works for more than one organization, it makes a lot more sense. And the schedule is, your informational meeting is with Stefan, who leads U.S. sales and marketing for H&M, a global clothing retailer. Steph is newly responsible for the launch of the U.S. e-commerce site, which has been delayed twice. Now, I'm going to be butchering lots of things about e-commerce and H&M. There is no Stefan. There is an H&M, and they have had some issues getting their e-commerce launched. But everything beyond that is fiction, and I think H&M is a lovely store, and there is no Stefan. But we're going to move ahead. Okay. I just thought I'd come up with a real example. Okay. So when we talk about informational interviews, there's a couple of different meanings for that. And for today, I'm going to say there's 2 types that I'm going to refer to. One is traditional informational interview. So this is someone, in my opinion, this is ideally with someone at your level who has the job you want, not a potential hiring manager. And the goal is primarily information. And this is the kind of thing you think about often like a college kid trying to learn what it's like to be a social worker or an investment banker or something. But in this case, it actually can happen at any level of seniority. And the other kind I'm going to call the exploratory meeting kind of informational interview. This is where the interviewers are at the level where they could hire you if they had an opening. And your goal isn't really information. It's to progress the whole process so that you start job interviewing with an interviewer. That's ideally your plan. And so we're mainly going to be talking about the second time. I do want to talk a little bit about the first type first. because I feel like the two of them is a little misunderstood, especially with senior folks like yourselves, or many of you, or soon-to-be senior folks like yourselves. So, okay. So people seem to automatically assume that if they have some success in their career, they're past this pure informational interviewing stage. And I say not so fast. I would recommend that. I say only to skip it when all four of these conditions are in place, which isn't as often as you think. You've had the same job as the one you're going for, and some of that time was within the last 2 years that you're doing the same job, and you've done a job at 2 or more organizations, and one of the organizations was obviously similar to the one you're targeting. This is actually not the case that all that applies. So let's think about you, the e-commerce executive, to meet with H&M. So I didn't make this a poll question, I should have, is does this apply to you? Can you skip it? And I can tell you that the answer is no, because while you've worked with a lot of internal e-commerce people, you've actually never been one, according to your bio. So you should probably talk to one, and it will, or 2 or 3, and it would make you a much better interviewer when the time comes. Sometimes on the inside, people use different language. They don't do the part of the job you see when you're their counterpart. They do other things as well. So my recommendation for the pure informational interview stage is you should have 3 to 6 meetings with people doing the role of targeting at your level, at the same type of organization. Try to meet with people like you think, well, I don't want to bring my dumb questions to the place I want to work. And I'm sure they won't be dumb, but let's say maybe they will. So find an organization that's quite similar, but for some reason you don't want to work for them. And an obvious reason might be that they're geographically not in your target. In this case, you might want to talk to a senior e-commerce executive at The Gap or at Levi Strauss, because they have launched U.S. e-commerce sites actually a long time ago, and they're based in California, and you want to stay headquartered in New York, so they might not be a great fit for you. And talking to them will help you sound more like an insider, and it will be less obvious. You won't use agency buzzwords or something by accident without realizing it. So that's that. And then move exploratory meetings. So people sometimes just question the logic. Why would I meet with people when they don't have an opening? Like, why wouldn't I just look for places they have an opening? This seems like such a waste of time and so roundabout. But my experience in doing this for many years and working with lots and lots of clients, 5% of my clients, I would guess, and I could do them, get their jobs this way. So it absolutely works. It's particularly valuable if you have an unusual background. It's almost the only way you're going to get a job. But also, if they have a job or them having a posted job is such a small part of the plan. So you really don't even need to look or care whether they have an opening. And thinking about jobs and openings is almost like trying to ban that way of thinking from your mind and your words when you're going through this process. Now, we estimate that 10% of the time, there's any one moment an unpublicized headcount. So if you meet, depending on the industry, I think this could be higher, but it may not be exactly at your level, but if they haven't filled it, it could be changed to your level. So 10% of the time there's an unpublicized headcount. 20% of the time there will be one soon. About 30% of the time there could be, they could get a headcount if they fought for it, really needed or wanted to hire. And 40% of the time there is no way that it's going to happen in the near future. You think, well, the odds aren't that great. That's even that there's an opening, and then, then I have to get the job. Well, here's what makes it interesting, is that while most of the time it won't lead to the job interview stage, when it does, it won't be such a competitive search. And they won't have already defined the level of the job in a way that excludes you. They won't have defined the criteria to say they need something they don't really need that you don't have. And that your chance of heartbreak once it does hit the job interview stage is much lower. So I'm a big fan of it. Now, these statistics, I kind of them up, but then I test tested them with managers all over the place, and practically everyone guessed the same thing, people that are working and are in this situation at different kinds of companies. And certainly my background is human resources, and at our end, that's what I would estimate. And people think that HR has some big control over the hiring process, and they have very little. It's amazing. And many, depending on the company, many jobs, it hears who they want to hire at the very end and just processes it. So the fact nobody knows someone has an opening does not mean there isn't one. Because when you're very busy, you don't have time to deal with it. So if someone comes in through an informational process, you're just thrilled about it. So, okay. So like we said, here's the overall plan. You're going to have exploratory meetings with numerous potential hiring managers. You're going to position as many as possible to a real job interview process, and you're going to receive one or more offers. Does that sound okay? So talk about the next steps here. So are about 6 steps that are best practices to wow them into an offer. Every one of these is important because this is an optional process. You don't have to hire now. They don't have to hire you. So a lot more of this is a charm offensive than possibly in a regular job interview situation, though I will tell you that a lot of these techniques will make you a much stronger interviewer in the traditional job interview process as well, and I really encourage you to start trying these even when you've got your job through a recruiter or a job posting. So the steps are prepare, I know how to spell it, but I'm not trying to know how to say this, assiduously. I'm going to keep the focus on them and then not on you. And the degree to which I mean that is extreme. That through every part of this process, we want to keep the focus on them. We want to understand their organization and their needs. Almost the only way you're going to demonstrate your expertise is asking questions of them about them. And in this process, you'll also kind of amplify their awareness of a labor gap, sort of what's not getting done as well. You're going to maintain likability with all decision makers, which is not always the easiest thing, as we know. And you're going to try and establish your value proposition with all decision makers. So this is a tall order, but in a way, a lot of this is what happens on a regular job interview as well. So, I'll get into those one by one. So the first one is the prepare assiduously. And the degree to which I want you to do this is immense, because this is actually how you're going to show your value, is through how much homework you're doing in a way. So before I'm going to about 4 or 5 areas that you're going to prepare. But it's before the very first meeting. You're going to prepare much more than you want to. During that meeting, you're going to ask questions to fill in the blanks. And after that meeting, you're going to go do more research. And then you're going to be hopefully meeting with someone else in the organization. It's continuous. So you're really studying them to an immense degree. And not just the organization, but the department, the work, the business model, everything.
Sarah, Christine, I just jump in here for a second?
Absolutely.
We have a couple questions coming in. Great. So, and I did want to point out, you're talking about a lot of preparation here, and I just wanted to remind folks that if you weren't on the webinar that Sarah did in April, she spent a lot of time focusing on how to get this meeting and the kinds of emails and correspondence and phone conversation to have ahead of time to get this meeting. So if you're looking for that information, and we have some questions about that coming in, I want you to know that's in that webinar as well. So here's a question. How many exploratory meetings does your average client have to go through before they get an offer? And maybe that's jumping ahead in your presentation here, but I want to throw that out.
Okay. It's actually a lot fewer than you would think. Sometimes people change. So in terms of the number of exploratory meetings that you have to have, I'd say people, if they're actually with hiring managers and they get to that stage, I would say on average it's single digits. It certainly might be more meetings than that in total, and sometimes at the beginning people are still refining their target and they are having meetings that turn out to be more informational because they're realizing their target's not quite right and they're slightly switching and they're moving around. So, but once they kind of hit the niche area, it's a lot fewer than you think, because oftentimes you really are wowing them because of the degree of background and preparation that you've done.
Mm-hmm.
It certainly could be more.
Mm-hmm. And just it's interesting from the poll responses in terms of how many informational interviews or exploratory meetings that folks on the call have had in the last 4 months. The percentage was low in terms of the number of meetings. Can you talk a little bit about why people find this difficult and to conduct these meetings? And you mentioned also the importance of the networking, that at this level folks are going to get their opportunities from this networking type of job search.
Well, as you said, that's covered a lot in the first presentation, how to get the meetings, but what I think people underestimate is overestimate the value of general networking with people who aren't potential hiring managers and going to events, and all of that is is helpful and interesting, but it's not necessarily on the critical path to them getting a job. So if something isn't getting you to a meeting with a potential hiring manager, if the networking or the event or whatever isn't about that, it's great, but it's not job hunting in this way as directly as it should be. And so I think that's one thing that derails people a little bit, and very human. And the other thing is they just don't know how to get these meetings, or they don't know the value of them because they think, well, they want to have an opening, so what's the point? And oftentimes people in your networking process will distract you. They'll say things like, oh, send me your resume and I'll send it to them. And the process doesn't involve, I explain in the other one are seeing your resume. And so a lot of it has to be just continue to focus on talking to people whether or not they have a job opening at this moment or not, and not bring, even if you know about job openings, don't bring them up, and keeping it very much, I just want to talk to them. At the point, I have a long-term interest in the organization, if you have to sort of explain a bit. And again, I have templates on how to do this in that webinar.
And I'm going to ask you one more question before I let you go, because it pertains to everything you're going to say here. Does the same process apply if you are looking for a board opportunity?
I'm not giving a paid or an unpaid board opportunity. I don't tremendous.
The question doesn't say.
It's one of the few things I don't know a tremendous amount how to get a paid board opportunity. I think certainly some of this might apply, but it's one of the few things I would, not one of the few, there's lots of things I'm not an expert in, but around, positions that I'm as educated about as someone else you might get advice from, so.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so, preparation, we talked about that. Okay, so there are 4 or 5 areas that I want you to do research in continuously, and people think they have, and then they can't answer these type of questions, so you really want to quiz yourself to make sure you understand everything. Now, as you see these questions, with H&M, as long as people know it's a clothing retailer, it's pretty obvious who they're comparing. Anyone could figure out the answers to these questions. Now, in terms of this product, the e-commerce launch, certainly major risks are going to be a big factor. Finding out what happened with the competitors in their e-commerce, what's going on, who things are working for. There's a lot of very specific things about this project that are a little less obvious, and I'll delve into it. But oftentimes an organization's business model, especially double line, for instance, like someone who's looking at a double bottom line organizations or not-for-profits, it's not so clear. Or people that are sort of advertising funded, but there's other things going on as well with some of these tech companies, and it's a little less obvious. So you want to be incredibly clear about this and able to explain it, and also able to understand how the department you're looking at fits into the rest of the organization. With the hiring manager, there's sort of 2 parts to this. The first is learning about their background and being very clear about it, so that it can also help you guess what they're going to like and not like about your background, and kind of prepare to present that in the best light. Then you also want to be continuously learning more as you go through the process about your boss's role in the organization. Who does he or she report to? Stefan in this case. Who does Stefan report to? What does he have? What else is on his agenda besides this e-commerce launch? Because that's not the center of his life. He's got other stuff. He's head of, sales marketing, and he just took this on. What did he do in his prior life that they gave him this product that sounds very scary to me with two problems in the past. They're success-related problems, by the way, just incredible volume. So what other areas does he have? What his or her biggest challenges besides this? And what milestones, what is his targets? What are they asking of him in terms of the e-commerce and other big goals? So the rest of the department's role. So by department, we could mean his department, like all his other direct reports. You want to sort of draw work there because you're going to do something in e-commerce. You're not exactly sure. There might be more than one role and more than one level you would consider. And so you really want to get a sense who all the players are, because these are the people you're going to be wanting to meet with later, and it'll help you. And if he gets distracted or drops the ball about setting up those meetings, then there might be other ways you can get them going. So who else he manages, what does everybody do? If you were to lead e-commerce, who's currently on the team already, and what are they all doing? Is it a good team? What are his challenges? And we already know the answer to that. What's the workload? It's probably pretty, because they want to be sure to have a lot of success. Okay, so then the fourth thing is the work you're going to be doing. Now, in normal job hunting process, you're always talking about the job, the descriptions, the responsibilities, the requirements. In this case, you want to about the work they need done, which may or may not be what you thought it was when you went in there to talk to them. And so it may be that you were thinking that you wanted to manage the whole of the e-commerce process, and you would be doing a more technical job. You'd be, worrying about the server overload and the demand and the efficiency of the sites and the backups upon backups, and you've got a lot of expertise managing that. But it may turn out slightly different focus from that they're concerned about the user experience and the design more, and that's really where they want to hire, because they just hired in the e-commerce area you thought you wanted. But you're really very interested in user design too, and H&M's a big enough company that a job running just that part of it would be still very interesting to you. So you might be doing a slight change. So when you learned about their needs, the changes, so that this isn't always what it was, when you prep for the first meeting, the desired position and the work. So, day-to-day responsibilities, big cyclical products. Sometimes, when you've worked opposite a job, like you've worked, they were your counterpart, the job you're going for. You think you know everything they do, but there might be this whole other behind-the-scenes thing that you don't know about. So, you want to find a sense of these kind of things. Okay. So that's the research, and that goes on before, during, and after. I want to talk about keeping the focus on them. And I think about you to try and think about this as sort of like a radical orientation, like a religion practically, that every step you want to be keeping the focus on them way more than you've been taught. So, and what you're not doing if you're keeping the focus on them is selling yourself directly. You're not talking about your successes. You're not showing how you accomplished something similar. That's not your main focus. That's your sort of at the end of the day focus. You bring in a little bit of that. There's other ways that you're going to impress them. So it's a little bit different, but it's very effective. So to start, you want to be spending the meetings trying to get them talking about what they need done and the work, but really anything is better than doing too much of the talking. So you want to practice transition questions so that if they ask you a question, you can then transition it back to them, and that you get them talking about what they need, because that's going to help you figure out what you might be able to do for them and how you might find a job at this organization if they don't have one officially open. And if they do ask you questions, you definitely don't want to have lengthy answers. Two reasons. One, it's important for them, and two, you focus on things before you know what their priorities are. A good rule of thumb is to never talk for more than a minute without pausing so they can redirect if you're kind of on the wrong track. And try in your answers with a reference to them or a question for them. This is great for any job interview, by the way, to do a lot more of this if you're talking with a potential hiring manager. And if you, about maybe a third of my clients find this quite difficult, the not talk them 50% in an interview. And what they have learned, and I've learned from them, that when they do this really well, they really do less of the talking, they're not expressing their thoughts and views as much as they would normally. They come away feeling almost uncomfortable, like they didn't enjoy the interview, it wasn't fun, because they're kind of biting their tongue and listening and exploring the other person's needs. They've also shared with me that these are the times they're more likely to get called back. The interviews where they felt frustrated because they were biting their tongue. They were obviously talking, but not as much as they normally do. So if you do tend to be a bit of a talker, if you come to a meeting feeling good, like you had a good time, it may you talk too much because that's comfortable to express yourself. So it only applies to a few of you, but it's worth thinking about a little bit, and it's a great thing to practice in non-work situations because it is difficult to do this in a different style. But when people that are good talkers do this, they are fabulous interviewers. I would be one of those people, by the way. Okay. So next part is understanding their organization. You want to encourage them to talk about you want them to talk about the whole team and who's on the team. You also want to be ready so that you can do an org chart. So you want to be listening for those names because all those things will be clues to work you might be able to do. They might talk about realizing that they mentioned somebody's not so strong. It might just sort of clue, opportunity to help with that team, maybe to manage that person, replace that person if they do get rid of that person, et cetera. Or a group that's very overworked, you want to be just listening for clues to how you might help. Any issues or problems, just general needs or they might need. And if listening, if you really are focusing on not talking, you will learn so many clues that help sell yourself to them and make it a lot easier to follow up. So make sure to take notes afterward because you think you'll remember, but it can be tough sometimes if you're talking to a few people. So you want to be acting like an employee. So when you are talking, you're talking about their work rather than your career aspirations. You be having a real conversation where you're generating ideas about what they need to do. So you're thinking like you're an employee rather than a candidate. I love Ask Headhunter is a website and a guy, Nick, thing that I'm not sure I can pronounce correctly, and I really love what he says about the job hunt process. And this topic, he says, people who want to change jobs are usually limited by failure to understand the day-to-day tasks and functions of the new job they want. The more about the work you want to do prior to applying for a job and throughout the process, the more attractive you will be to the employer. Don't work on the job training. Don't wait for a manager to figure out how you would fit in. Make an investment yourself or don't pursue the job. And many candidates that are very senior think that if they talk about the details of the job, it will make them seem more junior. It really doesn't. It makes you sound more like an insider and that you're ready to hit the ground running. So, well, as we know, we don't apply to be President of the United States. I know there are questions that former presidents could ask if they were interviewing with whoever that would be, that would show that they were insiders. They talk about, dealing with the chiefs of staff meetings and, how it's going. And they'd ask about, did they memorize the bomb codes or did they have little clues in their, daytimer, the launch codes, all these sort of little things and, dealing with all the tours in the White House. You could tell that they'd done that job before by the questions they asked. that someone who, had run a different country wouldn't be able to ask. Doesn't necessarily mean you're junior. So try a variety of questions if you're having a hard time getting them talking. So you could ask big picture questions, what's going on with the e-commerce initiative, asking about the milestones. A question that's always nice to ask because it lets them know you're assuming they can't hire now, which relaxes them. You can say, if you had carte blanche to add an additional e-commerce executive, what key 3 things would you like the new hire to accomplish or to accomplish in the first 4 months or something along those lines? Okay. Are there any questions you want to jump in with, Christine, or showing?
I just unmute myself. Yes, we do have questions. You talked earlier quite a bit about research. Where do you research all that information about the company's performance, and isn't that proprietary information?
It sometimes is, but you certainly always start with Googling anything. I was sort of amazed at, what I could find out about the various e-commerce launches of various clothing companies. And, Uniqlo's website's down as we speak, or was last night. I was sort of laughing. They were comparing it to Uniqlo and Zara and how they had gone. And it sounds like a very dangerous territory to me, actually. I would be terrified if I were this person. So many things that can go wrong. But there's a lot of blogs out there you can find out. The other thing you can do is try and find people at similar companies and ask. Often people in sales roles or vendor roles will chat a little bit about things to you. You can kind of get general background, people that used to work for the company. And certainly, there is a decent amount of public information in terms of press releases from them, articles about them from different analysts on the size of the company. I mean, you can't always get this if it's a tiny startup. But, you just want to try. And if you can't get it ahead of time, then you ask in the meeting. You just make sure that everything that is publicly available, you've already so that you don't ask something that you could have found out ahead of time.
Okay. Good. We have a question. Why would a hiring manager be willing to talk to you if there's no immediate benefit to them?
Well, smart managers know that they want to have a pipeline of candidates. But the main reason is, again, this is sort of what we covered in the last webinar rather than this topic, is that oftentimes that's the topic of the whole webinar is getting them to meet with you. But many times you're getting an introduction in. And yet they may be doing it initially only as a favor to their former colleague or friend. And then it's your job to make them care about you independently, which we're talking about a bit here.
Okay. The number of questions about people changing industries and or geographic locations. Is it necessary to meet people in person for an initial exploratory meeting?
Not necessarily, and certainly for the real and pure informationals, they'll often be on the phone. It isn't. Now, I think that the ideal way to go if you're trying in a new geography is to plan a trip to that place in advance and try and schedule meetings everywhere. And one of the weird wrinkles in human nature is that if you tell people you're flying in just for a few days and you're meeting with companies, like them, they're more likely to meet with you. If anything, if you live in the city, it's actually easier in this goofy way. So I would certainly think if you can, depending on where you're going, you can afford to do that, I might go for the in-person and kind of act like the sort of, you're getting in. And it's this weird sort of competitive thing happens where they want to meet with you sometimes.
Okay. For someone who's currently employed but expects to be looking in the next 12 to 18 months, how soon should they begin this process of tapping into formal and informal channels?
Well, to the extent that they do need to gain some real information, I would do that right away. If they do not leave their current company for a year or so, I might wait a little bit if they feel like they're a candidate and they're going to start getting offers too soon. I might say more like 6 months. It depends on your situation and how much people are feeling the love when you're going on more informational type meetings. It's a little hard to say. And if you're changing industries, and this is kind of the only way to get a job, is to go through the hidden job market. There's just a lot more of the informational interview stage that you're going to want to go through, and just even more research, maybe a little bit of preparing, more detailed preparing that I'm going to talk about a bit more as well.
Okay, I'll ask you one more question here before I let you go on. What do you do if you are early career and unclear about what specific type of role you would want to do, but you know you would like to plug into a particular organization?
Just the pure informational interview process. So try to meet with people more at your level, and if you are working, always mention that in the process again. So you want to be just having pure informationals and kind of asking people what they do all day a little bit, and what they like about it, what they don't, and that's the best and by most valuable way to make those decisions.
Great, thank you.
Okay, so let's get through the rest of this a little bit. So we talked about, a variety of questions to get them talking, and something. How would you define a successful launch? That's kind of a great question because they will talk about what's on their mind, and that's very general, but it could get them very specific, and you can find out what their metrics are, and it can help you figure out if there might be a hole in their staffing plan or their plan in general. So now I want to talk a little bit about how asking good questions, good, smart, specific questions, can show your confidence without ever having to tell a story about your accomplishments. So you will do some of that at the end. You want to do that only after you're really clear. So what you want to be doing is asking a lot of questions about their projects and their needs, and kind of asking more specific questions. You're going to be amplifying their awareness of their unmet needs. So in the case of this launch, if you ask some questions about who's doing this, who's doing that, how's it going, who's in charge of this, and you might hit something they haven't thought of, then it's sort of odd, but this is the one thing that's a little bit of a negative spin that can be a positive for you, in that to the extent that you make them more anxious about any gap in their labor, as it were. By labor, it could be very senior level labor, right? So that they have consultants doing this and they have staff doing this, but nobody's really looking at this thing you just asked about and like, what were they thinking? You might actually increase their anxiety about this project, but that could actually lead to your help, because if they don't have a little bit of urgency and feel like they really need you or really want you, then they want to string you along and it never kind of moves on. And so you want to increase the urgency by getting them, a more positive way to put it, excited about you coming on board. It could sometimes be anxious about getting the problem solved that you guys have been talking about. So it's not always bad to be delving into their issues a little bit. So here's more about the specific question process. So the hiring manager doing most of the talking. Do not underestimate how much people like people who listen to us. One of the fear interview stories I had personally was I was interviewing with my boss-to-be in this long cycle of interviews all day. And the HR person brought me lunch in the beginning of that meeting, and didn't bring lunch. And I was expected to eat, basically, during the interview with this sort of handsome young man, and I was young at the time. It was very funny. And I decided that a confident person would eat. And so what he said was, why don't I give you a presentation about the company while you eat? And he talked the entire interview. I barely said anything but nodded and looked at him like he was a genius and said a few smart questions, and I got the job. And I laughed, and I think it was because I was listening so intently, trying to keep my mouth shut, as it were. That's kind of extreme listening, but it worked at the time. You want to keep focused on the work they need done. So one of the things about talking about your accomplishments is that they're never as interesting or fabulous to someone else as they feel to you. And they don't seem quite as perfectly relevant to them as they do to you. So if you're asking questions about their work, they're going to be interested and engaged. And the fact is that an expert in e-commerce could come up with much smarter, specific questions than I could. And I came up with some, like through Googling, for this presentation that are a little more technical than I would come up with on my own. But you can tell somebody knows what they're doing by the way they consult with you about your problem. And it's a lot more interesting if the focus is on the person. You're not bragging and you're not boring. Okay. So then, so when asking them about their needs, they're going to come in a few different categories that you can be listening for. So if you think of categories of things, needs, and this will really vary. Our example is this e-commerce launch, but it could, you could be going for a, financial analysis job. It's a little bit more routine without this huge dramatic risk at the end, other than maybe the yearly audit might feel that way to you. So one problem that companies have often is too much work, and that can take a few different forms. In this case, you might ask them, are you confident about launching by March with only a team of X? You might not be this obvious about it, but, what kind of hours has the team been working? How's the morale? How's the management team doing? How's the employee retention been through the process? Do you feel like you have sufficient resources for the launch? Do you have the time to keep making sure you do? In other words, fighting for those resources. You might ask about the consulting firms and how that's going, because they would certainly think you'd be a great person to match the agencies. And that can take a lot. These questions could have very different forms depending on who you're talking to. The other thing is to ask about specific products and risks coming up. So in this case, how are things going with server capacity testing? Does your team have bandwidth? If you're using a vendor, are you pleased? And then ask about their payment solutions, big part of e-commerce. Is it set up sufficiently testing? Who's leading it? And you could ask about something they'd never thought of. This could be the thing they never thought of. If you have a marketing project plan to modulate demand as well as capacity, maybe they don't want to have these huge, immense events that crash server all the time. Maybe they want to have like a slow launch and think about how to use celebrities and fabulousness without creating such intense spikes in demand. Do you think such a plan to modulate demand would help? And they're like, oh, I never thought of that, maybe. Or maybe they think that's a dumb idea. This isn't my industry. So then you want to talk about lost opportunities. So maybe there's nothing broken, but be making more money if they were doing something differently. So in this case, this is definitely a potential lost opportunity. How much additional monthly profit might the e-commerce site bring in if launched successfully? And then again, these are a little too obvious. You might be a little more subtle than this, but I'm just trying to show you the idea. And wouldn't necessarily ask these on the first interview. Certainly these would be down the road. So how much revenue do you estimate Zara has gained their competitor from their U.S. e-commerce sales? Do you think you'll lose sales to Uniqlo, assuming they get back online soon? I was laughing. And I'd always make a joke. What was your first thought when you heard Uniqlo's site had gone down? Phew, I'm not the only one probably, right? And so the last couple things are you need to maintain likability with all decision makers. And this is not even possible. But basic tips are to display unwavering positivity, which is why you might want to make those questions a little more subtle, but especially about yourself. So when they're answering questions about your life, your past employers, you want to be radically positive about the weather. So if the weather's bad, you say, yeah, but it's supposed to clear up by the weekend. Like, you want to smile as much as possible, probably when it feels comfortable. And one way to make sure that you stay positive when you are talking about, if it does turn into more classic interviewing questions, something that is hard to talk positively about is to try to begin every question with a broad-based positive statement conveying something emotional and positive about the subject. So let's say you really had a difficult situation at your old company, but they know someone there, so they're asking you about it. And you might say something like, I learned so much in my years at XG company. I worked with such intelligent, hardworking people. It was a great experience. Now, they may be hardworking and intelligent, but evil in every other way. But you set this to say something positive, and it'll make it a lot easier, and you'll just sound like a more positive person. So it's more than not bad mouthing your employer. It's finding something positive to say and making it seem genuine by saying I loved it there, or something that you can say that you feel comfortable. Then the one thing you want to be doing is demonstrating your value proposition to each decision maker. And this is obviously very challenging, and this is not something you're trying to do in the first meeting. But this isn't what's going to close you the job offer. So again, you're keeping the focus on them, but you are now starting to talk a bit about your background and successes, but only in a way that matches the individual person you're talking to right then and there's needs and the company's needs. And you're still constantly bringing it back to them by asking them a question as you're answering. And in many cases, now this may not always be formal, but this is a great exercise even if you never share it with them. So after you've had a few meetings and it's really starting to look more like an interview process and you feel like there's a potential opportunity if you do everything right, you want a business plan to illustrate your value proposition, and formal or not formal, but you want to do it for yourself. So you want to be, it can get the team excited. You want them to be almost impatient about bringing you on board because they really see how you're going to help things. So you're going to define the top-level problems and challenges they're facing. You want to define tasks you will do and the skills you apply to meet departmental and company challenges. And you want to estimate the profit you can bring to the bottom line. It won't always be like profit. Sometimes it will be higher revenues, bringing in profit and lower costs. Sometimes it'll be more new efficiencies, increased customer satisfaction, but you want to try and put it in a way that will show how it will lead to higher profit and use as many dollars as you can so that you're almost saying, like, I want you to pay me X $100,000, but here's how I'm going to bring you way more of that in actual dollars and cents value. And even if you don't share this as a business plan with them, it will make you interview much, much better, and it will make you more confident that they really would be crazy not to hire you, and you'll be able to just be more confident in your presentation. And of course, you want to always be following up thoughtfully with everyone, even the dog if he interviewed you, and you want to, of course, be emailing everybody within 2 to 48 hours and find ways to keep in touch throughout. You don't want to thank them. This is why you take the good notes. Be writing thoughtful emails, focusing on their interests and needs, showing that you remember and take an interest in their views, and you always want to be confirming the next step and trying to move that along. So, we have a couple minutes for a couple more. Do we have a couple minutes for a couple more questions, or do we need to close now, Christine?
No, sure do, and I have a few questions here for you, Sarah.
Great.
Okay. So let's start with, is this informational process also effective with recruiters, or should the focus be solely with individuals or hiring managers at the companies?
Great question. It does not really work with recruiters. With external recruiters or really internal recruiters, this process does not work. A couple of reasons. They job that much. Even if they've been there a long time, they're very bright. They just don't. They might know about the company culture and a little bit about what they want to hire for, but they don't first get involved. They only get involved when there is a formal job posting, which is often too late. And they won't, unless you're interviewing to work in HR, of course, then you do this exactly. But it's really a very different technique, and it's going to involve a more traditional job hunting process where you're answering questions. And it's a completely different technique. And then you start this when you start talking to people on the line in the departments that you're interviewing for.
Okay, good. What tips can you share on informational interviews that are not with people in the department or the role that you're interested in?
Well, I almost want to say, why are you having those meetings? You might want to have a call to learn a little bit, and other people in other departments can give you a little sense of who you should be talking to, the names of the people in the departments you do want to talk to. But sometimes it's hard to tell. Maybe you want to do something in business development. Sometimes that's the name that's in marketing. Sometimes it's in sales. Sometimes it's in strategy. Sometimes they call it something. And so you're trying to figure out who does the work that you're interested in doing there and who you might want to talk to. So you really might be meeting with those people. If they're your friend, or you want to meet with them anyway, or you might. But generally, then they're not really the right people. They're not on the critical path, and that would be an example of ways to stay busy without being as effective as you might. So certainly you might have quick calls with people in other groups to get the information that will help you get on the critical path.
Okay, thank you. Here's another question. If your goal is to join a private equity or VC-backed company, would you characterize the important strategy for interviews with the owner/investors versus the hiring manager in the portfolio company?
Oh, that's a good question. Well, I think with the owner and the portfolio company, it would be very much exactly what I'm suggesting here about the business and the getting very specific about the exact needs and what they're doing and so forth. Now, with the portfolio company, it's good at that too, but they might be a little bit more. It might be a little bit more like traditional recruiter questions, not so much like the really difficult behavioral-based ones, but they may ask a little bit background in your a little bit more questions analyzing your resume. It might be a little tougher in that way, but that you studied up on that portfolio company and you can start complimenting them and asking them about their strategy and why they bought this company, and just find stuff that's going to distract them from critiquing and analyzing your every decision, which I think you can do often. Definitely recommend that, especially if you don't have the perfect investment banking background that they tend to look for.
Okay, great. I'm going to ask you one last question here and then let you kind of wrap up. You talked a lot about listening and making the focus be on the hiring manager that you're talking to. So someone has a question here about when I'm focused on listening and asking questions, I slip into the we and us as if I'm already part of the team. Is that good or bad?
It's generally good because it doesn't sound like you're already picturing being there. I'd say it's bad unless they seem to think it's bad, but I feel like it's kind of good, and especially if they're doing it, it's even better. If they're not making a face, then it's a good sign.
Great. So we are up against the top of the hour here. So, Sarah, what advice do you have here as we wrap up? What are your final thoughts?
Well, at the risk of being extremely repetitive, I would say listen to the webinar because, of course, there's a lot that's very, very meaty, and it's going to explain a lot of things that are very not intuitive. Learn the hard way. And the other thing I would say is and you're going to talk about this some more, but to get some help. So I say to get, and Harvard Business School provides fantastic help, and as do folks like myself, of course, but you're going to talk about your resources. But regardless, you want to get help somewhere. You need to have a very clear job target, so if you don't and you can't get there through informational interviewing, to get some help with that. You're not getting lots of meetings with hiring managers. Maybe you need some tweaks to the process, and that following the process I recommend exactly is a lot more effective than doing something sort of like it. And I can tell you that. You're not getting second interviews. Means interview coaching is hugely helpful. It can make all the difference. You've had second or greater interviews but haven't closed, so maybe you need a little help with that part of the interviewing process about the kind of getting them excited and feel a sense of urgency about hiring you. And if getting help with the negotiating can help all along the way, and some of the mistakes we make with the negotiating can happen quite early in the process, so if you feel like that's not a strength, I might get some help with that even before you get going a bit. And so I think I'm all done, Christine, unless you can think of anything else, and maybe you can wrap up.
Thank you so much, Sarah. This was great, and we've already gotten a lot of thank yous through our Q&A box here. And as Sarah mentioned, and I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, Sarah's previous webinar, the step-by-step roadmap for landing meetings with hiring managers at your target organization, is available on our website in the video library. That's on our homepage at www.alumni.hbs.edu/careers. And this webinar and the slide deck will also be archived there as well if you'd like to go back and take a listen to it following this event. Our next webinar will be Communicate for Success, Strategies for Successful Leaders. Part 1, this is our new professional development program, and it will be on managing up. The presentation will be next Tuesday, November 13th at 12 to 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. If you have any questions about today's webinar or would like to contact Alumni Career and Professional Development for any reason, you can reach us at 617-495-1433 or career_advisors at hbs.edu. Thank you so much for joining us today, and have a good day.
Okay, Bob, thanks.